We're back.
It absolutely makes me laugh. Makes me laugh how little, half of me is impressed with it, but how little we have to prepare for this.
Oh.
Like I came over, we ate dinner, and we already had 30 minutes of really cool conversation before we could even turn anything on. And I'm curious if there's anything, we kind of briefly, you sent me that video about Stutz, the therapist that's so
there was a documentary on him with the, who's the actor?
Jonah Hill, yeah.
So I have not watched it. Thought it looked interesting. So I saw a little bit of him in the trailer, and I don't have access to Netflix right now, so
yeah.
I'd forgotten about it. But I was curious because he was saying that he had thrown away everything that had ever been taught to be able to actually really be a therapist. Now, I don't know what that's about, but I found that a curiosity.
Yeah. And it was a podcast you sent me. I listened to probably 30 minutes of it, and I found him intriguing, but I'd have to consume a lot more of him to like really have thoughts on his approach, his style, his belief system. But the thing that we floated was, well, here we are critiquing this other therapist, right? And
we know nothing.
But what are the metrics by which we're critiquing? And so take this famous, renowned therapist Stutz out of it and just say, what are the guidelines, rules, belief systems that you think are required for you to do your job well? You know what I mean? That was one thing. Or if you had something on your mind, we can just go wherever.
Well, no, I've actually, interestingly enough, I've had in the last 6 months 2 students who are interested in going into becoming therapists, and they wanted to reach out and talk to somebody who was practicing, and which had me think through what really matters. And they were thinking about doing marriage and family therapy, and I said, you can. I said, here's one thing I'll give you a little heads up on. It doesn't matter what your degree is. If you're a doctor, a nurse practitioner, a psychiatric nurse,
social worker,
if you're a social worker, marriage and family therapist, clinical psychologist, a counseling psychologist, et cetera, when you go to get your continuing education credits through these various venues, everybody in the room's got a different degree. Mm-hmm. Everybody's getting the same training anymore.
Yeah.
And so I'm not really sure. Just go to the degree, the theories that you like, that resonate with you, that make sense to you. But there's this really strange thing, I think, in the therapeutic community now, which is it doesn't matter what you learn going through school. From then on, it's all these modalities. And what I thought I was hearing from this guy was that he had pushed away from those modalities and just wanted to be with the person and take whatever was being dropped in his lap, and which was hard for him, which that hinted at that he was alive to and interested in their pain or their sorrow or their joy or their whatever it was that was besetting them. He really joined them in that. So there seemed to be something about care there, but not a sappy kind of sort of, I'm going to validate every emotion you have. More of a, you tell it to me, okay, I'm going to take it in. It's going to be in me, but I'm still going to come at you with what I think is crazy about your pain.
And honesty to it.
Be interesting to see. I don't know. So if I think about being a therapist in general, my starting place is I've got to actually care about others. I have to be okay with them having struggles. I actually have to see that they are a person, they're real, their struggles are real, I can't have any contempt around the kind of struggles they have. And so that means I need to get some, I don't know the language for this. There was a point in going through school and doing the mock sort of therapy. You have clients in the school, practica. But I remember at one point in one of those sessions, it became real. And I wasn't worried about who was behind the two-way mirror. I just was, I really was, it was a couple. It was a very strange experience in my mind. I've never been able to replicate it, which is also important. But they just would go back and forth. And nothing I could talk to them about ever landed for them. And on this night, I just had them, let's do some role reversal. You ever tried that? No, never have. Okay, so husband, you're going to be the wife, you're going to speak for her. So you have to be thinking about where she's coming from. Wife, you're going to need to be doing that. And they, kind of fumbled at it, and we got into it 5, 10, 15 minutes. Then I remember they're really kind of getting into the issues. It's probably longer than 15 minutes. It was probably a good half hour. Mm-hmm. And I'm making it up going along, and we have to rethink. Okay, remember, no, you're the wife, you're not the husband. And so here's the husband speaking as the wife, and I remember asking her as a hand. Yeah. I remember saying, "What do you think your husband would say about that?" And the peculiar thing was his eyes just dilated. Literally, you could see them go, boom, no iris. And what he said was stunning. It was like it cut through everything. It just was this really simple place where he was struggling, and didn't jump up and down. It just, it's really interesting. You see that your husband might see it that way, and got around, did the same thing with a wife. Bang, eyes just dilate. I'm assuming that was some sort of trance or something, but I don't know enough to know what that is. But in those moments, what they said to each other resolved the conflict. But they were speaking as the other, and then thinking about what they themselves would say, and it somehow, I don't know what happened that night, because I've never been able to replicate it, but for them, that all of a sudden had them realize, I've been seeing this all wrong. In fact, I've learned something tonight about how to begin to get into your shoes and see it through your eyes without abandoning what's going on with me.
Yeah.
So would I then say, you got to try this with your clients? Absolutely not.
Right. Because there's something more to why it worked than the technique.
Yeah, it's never the technique. I'm unimpressed with the techniques. There's always this strange thing. There's a couple there. They have a relationship. But the relationship is an abstraction. I can't talk to the relationship. I can only talk to them. I'm not in the relationship the way they are in the relationship. That's if they're both in the room. If one of them's in the room, I can never be taken in to think what they're telling me is the absolute truth about what's going on with the other person, right? That's a view they have of the other person in the relationship. And I think sometimes we forget that. Something so simple and basic as, what is actually going on in the room? Who's who and what's going on? So,
what we see is not what is. And what we think is not what is.
Say more about that.
Well, I'm thinking about, okay, you started with, I need to care.
Yeah.
And what I really liked about that is I was like, I might be able to pull that off sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, because it's interesting, like before that, I was thinking about the idea of understanding other people, right?
Yeah.
And to me, having talked with you and having talked about the idea of self-deception, truthfully, understanding myself feels very daunting. Mm-hmm. Like I really get cautious about thinking that I can trust my own thoughts and my own beliefs. And I've really had to put a lot of effort into thinking like, when can I and when can't I? I do think one of the fundamental purposes of therapy is that somebody, and here's my clientele, they're generally pretty smart. They're generally really good people. I have yet to run into the client that doesn't, I think maybe they do a lot of things that aren't good, but I haven't run into the client that doesn't want to be a good person. I haven't met that person yet. You know what I mean? And so whatever they're bringing into the room is something that a smart, good person hasn't been able to figure out on their own. And then why is that?
Well, and that always takes me right back to self-deception. And my my simplistic way of trying to talk about that is, if I'm self-deceived, then I have a problem and I can't see it. Others can see it, but I can't see it. And then to try and help either a client or a group that I'm talking with, working with, I said, look, here's a way to figure this out. I want you to think of someone, either at work or in your extended family, someone who really is a problem. They really are a problem. And raise your hand when you got someone in mind. A few seconds will pass and everybody raises their hand. I said, okay, now I want to ask you a question. Did that person think they were the problem? And everybody answers no. So who did they think was a problem? Well, everybody else.
Or somebody else.
Or somebody
at a
else.
minimum. Or
Right.
something else.
Or something policy, something.
Not them.
Not them.
Outside of them.
I said, so how do you help them?
You have to help them consider that they're the problem.
And you just want to point that out to them.
Right.
By the way, I want to point out to you, you're a problem. And then number one, that's so confrontive and blunt. It's sort of on the face value. It seems absurd. And yet on occasion I've done that and they've gone, thanks. I know there's something wrong about how I'm thinking, but I've never been able to figure it out. Can you help me figure this out? And we're going, right?
And for everyone that's worked for, there'd be 100 that would be a bad idea to do it that way.
999. I've actually kept count.
Yeah. 1 in 1,000, you could just be like, you're the problem.
Yeah, you're the problem.
So it's not just being direct. It's not this behavior.
No.
There's something deeper than, something else happened when you said you're the problem. They were able to hear it.
Something was going on. Other things we talked about across the weeks, somehow maybe some trust develops, maybe they're willing to consider possibilities in a way. Whatever stories I've shared about my own failures and other people's successes, maybe that helped them. It just creates a possibility in a moment that maybe you can be helpful with.
Well, and it does take me back to our first thing we've written down here, that we need to care. If you are, for some reason, resistant to the idea that something is your fault, is it going to be harder or easier to consider that from somebody who you believe cares about you or somebody who you don't believe cares about you?
Yeah.
So there's something fundamental in there that caring about them allows them to consider that, right?
And look, I think this reveals me, but I remember somewhere in my late teens, early 20s, I had a class in psychology, or I met people who were in class. I don't actually remember. But I remember being really well defended around the idea that I did not like these people. Mm-hmm. Because somehow they thought they had gone to schooling and they figured out these secrets, and they had insights about me that I couldn't have. And so think about me, that Chris, coming into you as a client. Mm-hmm. How would you ever be able to hint to me that I've got a challenge of some sort? Because I'm so well defended against that you're up to something and you're sneaky and it's malarkey it's just snake oil. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't even have been open to therapy at that point.
Right, because you already had too much defense against.
Yeah.
Did you, I in my therapy classes was notoriously a bad student. Actually, I got great grades in it, but like my own appraisal of myself, I was a bad student. All I would do, and part of it was a little bit of snobbery. Like, I got my Arbinger stuff, I love my Arbinger stuff, and I can see through these other things, right? Anyway, so they'd give these assignments and I would read about these other modalities just enough to go like, oh, like here's the Arbinger slant on that. And then I would quickly pivot from here, this is saying this, pivot to Arbinger, and then I would just write about Arbinger. And luckily, my teacher accepted that in my assignments. You know what I mean? But I'm curious, is it Carl Rogers? Yeah, the Rogerian, what is it? Positive regard,
Conditional.
unconditional positive regard. That's this Rogerian idea. And that I think is true. Like you have to think good things about your client, patient.
For me, I would say I just need to see their humanity.
Well, and here's the interesting part for me.
Good and bad.
When people interact with that, when I would hear discussions in class, they would say, so you have somebody who beats up women and you need to have unconditional positive regard for them. So, and I kind of get that from our opening stanza of we need to care and who's going to consider that they're the problem. But being a bad student, I'm not sure if it ever addresses this. I'm curious if you think back to any exposure you've had to Carl Rogers. Does it ever attempt to say like how to do that? Like how to have an unconditional positive regard? Because that's a tall ask. And to me, it sounds almost like faking it to be like, oh, like you beat your wife on a daily basis. I unconditionally positively regard you. Please continue. You know what I mean? Like there's an absurdity to it. Yeah. Unless you can answer for me, how do I have a positive regard for someone doing that making that big of a mistake? But if you can do that, I think part of the self-deception, part of the I can't hear you, I can't consider that I'm the problem. I think what they can't consider is that it's too painful that they might be a bad person.
But that assumes that they kind of know deep down they're doing bad things.
Okay, do you think they don't, or do you?
Well,
tell me more about what you're saying there.
So that was sort of, there's a lot of people who've tried to figure out self-deception. In the 20th century, probably the biggest character addressing that was Sigmund Freud. Mm-hmm. And his model, and I think it'd be fair to say it this way, it would be a model of deception, but not a model of self-deception. In other words, he would see person A, he would sort of lead you into it this way. You got person A and you got person B. Person A knows the truth and withholds that from B, deceives B, so B does not know the truth. And then he draws a circle around all that and turns it into a stick figure with a torso and some legs and arms. And he puts all that in the mind, okay? Bifurcates it, divides it down the middle, said over here, the part that knows the truth is the unconscious mind, and the part that is kept from knowing the truth, is being deceived, is the conscious mind. And then you have this, the unconscious mind had what he called primary cyclical powers, what we would call
unconscious.
The unconscious mind.
Okay, urges.
Urges, libido, these things that want to express themselves, drives, those sorts of things. And so they would express themselves. Well, where did they express themselves into but the conscious mind? Mm-hmm. And the conscious mind had secondary cyclical processes, which included the ability to repress such a drive. Okay, so here's it being expressed. The conscious mind would then repress it, which Freud thought built up this pressure until you had this sort of psychic episode when you really messed up.
And did something crazy.
And the Frenchman came along, the existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre, comes along and says, notice that we'd have to know the truth very clearly in order to hide it from ourselves carefully. And what he noted was, in order for the conscious mind to repress a drive, it has to become aware of it. So the original conception of the unconscious mind keeps the conscious mind from knowing what's afoot falls apart immediately. Freud took that critique seriously. And for the rest of his life, he tried to figure out variations on the model to get a hold of the fact that still made it work. And so he made part of the conscious mind unconscious, and other...
It's just id, ego, and now we got a superego. Yeah.
So, and those things all came later, but his daughter, Anna, said that he was nearly insane when he went to his grave because he couldn't figure it out.
Couldn't reconcile it.
And quite frankly, when you go through and you read it, you realize how hard he's working to sort this stuff out. Mm-hmm. And it was a monumental effort. And quite frankly, Terry Warner would tell you that challenge made by Sartre to Freud helped him realize it couldn't be a two-part thing. It couldn't be part of you knows the truth and the other part doesn't know the truth. Yeah. Which that idea gave rise in our culture that, well, deep down he knows the truth. Well, deep down is down in the unconscious mind.
So are you saying that the opposite is true, that deep down we don't know the truth?
Well, I would say this. There's not any, when I'm self-deceived, I'm self-deceived. There's not a part of me that remains unself-deceived.
So there's times when we know the truth if we are not self-deceived.
Yeah.
But when we
we have those moments all the time with others.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me.
But then around some issue,
well,
I see it all distortedly. And there's not someplace down somewhere in my soul or something where I know Carl's a good person, but I'm just being a jerk. No, I really am convinced you're a jerk. It's not showmanship.
Yes, I get what you're saying there, and that makes sense to me. Like when we're deceived, we do not see the truth and we don't understand it.
We see it distortedly.
Yes.
Which Sartre gave Warner a hint, and the hint was it had to be a unitary act. There had to be a single choice that set all this in motion. You couldn't have it be a two-step process. Prior to Freud, there was another individual. So his is a bifurcation model, a divided model. And then there was Fingeret, who had you've got a weak belief and a strong belief. Sort of these tug of war within, which also, they don't work, it doesn't work again. So a lot of, Terry has a book out now called Self-Betrayal, which is his theory. And he very carefully goes through these two models and he really has worked hard to show them exactly how Freud or Fingeret would show these, how they would do it. And then he can show you, he then pulls out how come it falls apart. It just won't, you can't quite pull it off.
Yeah.
But these men were working hard. People have been at this for 3,000 years.
And for sure, Terry didn't come up with, he stood on the thoughts of other men as he came up with a theory that to me and you works.
Yeah.
Well, so let me just ask you this, just to kind of circle it back. I need to care. When somebody feels that I care.
And you don't have power over that. You don't have control over that.
But when they do, something about that sometimes creates a change that allows them to consider that they might be the problem.
I might be part of the problem.
And I guess what I'm saying is, whether they are able to see it clearly or not, my ability to see it clearly is essential if I'm going to be helpful. And by see it clearly, here's what I believe, and here's what I see work. When I feel like, oh yeah, I might have done a good job this time. That might have been helpful, that conversation. It's because I see that in all moments, even when we're lost, we're either protecting being a good person or we're pursuing it. And when I see like your fight that you won't let go of and your problem that you won't let go of, it kind of reminds me of that. No one's going to know what we're saying because it was a video we watched earlier, but we watched that video about Thomas McConkie and oh geez, just lost my train of thought. Just a second.
So he's in this experience, and he, early on in his life, he gets crossways with his parents, their church, their religion, and he, in his language, he said, I exiled myself. I left the country. I put many miles, thousands of miles between myself and them.
Right.
And he would have formulated that as, I saw the conflict being located over there in my father. That's where that's why I couldn't be around him. But he said it took him 10 years before that sort of crumbled on him. And he realized, wait a minute.
He always could say, I was running from my painful family parents.
Yeah, and how terrible they were, and their insistence that I had to comply, or whatever it was.
The conflict was in my family, but one day he realized the conflict was in him.
Well, he notices this thing, which I think is profound. He, instead of seeing the conflict over there, he realized he'd taken it with him these many thousand miles away.
Yeah.
That even though, because he didn't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
But what he had never considered in any genuine way, any authentic way, was, wait a minute, I'm the locus of this conflict.
Right.
It's right here, in here.
And I carry it with me.
Doesn't matter where I go, but and
it rules my life. He thought he was running from the conflict, but he was having his life ruled by, he had to get away from his family, so he can't live certain places. So even though he thinks he's got distance,
can't talk about certain subjects.
It's always right here.
That's right. Which is, look, that's the same thing Larry Olson said when he was a consultant to the movie Jeremiah Johnson that had Robert Redford, and he plays this mountain man. And as part of the preparation that, Larry made all the bows and arrows and the skins, and he did all that stuff. It's one of the most authentic movie in terms of how what kind of arrowheads they had,
survival skills,
how they painted their arrows, all that stuff. It was terrific. But as part of the research for him to go do that, he read all the existing journals of the mountain men that he could find, the Kit Carsons, this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy. And he said, what was fascinating, I remember this conversation with him. He said, what was fascinating about all of that was these men left to go into the mountains to be alone, to be away from that village. But as you read their journals, that's all they ever talk about is those jerks back in the village.
Right. They never left them behind.
You can't leave it behind. That's the nature of conflict.
So let me see if I can tie back into that. Thank you, Chris.
Let's make it simpler.
But thank you. So I find that here's when I think, because this is the question, like, how do I know I'm seeing you clearly, right? Like, it's my job to care about you, and to me, caring about you is seeing the truth about you. How do I know when I'm doing that? I find that regardless of what their behavior is or how much they are the problem, right? If I see them, and I have to really understand it. I can't just say, well, just see it. I can't just do it. I have to actually be able to see it. Yeah. But if I see that as an effort to express your values, to be a good person, you're trying to protect yourself by hiding from this. If I actually see, like, underneath all of it, if I see the real you, I think when I see the real them, that's when they seem to be able to consider that they're the problem.
So this is what I type. If I'm self-deceived, we'll use the box as a way to capture that. So here I am, and I'm self-deceived. Okay. I'm in the box, and what that means is I have these consequences to an action called self-betrayal that got me into self-deception, that got me into the box, that got me into this resistant way of being, and I need to be justified. I blame others for my experience, or I blame some aspect of myself that's unchangeable for my experience. I exaggerate faults. I minimize virtues in others, and I reverse that for me. I experience myself as a victim, etc. If I'm out of the box, let's just say those things aren't there, okay? And so here I see people as people. So here comes a people. Let's say it's my teenage daughter or my teenage son, and they come in and they say, I hate you. You're stupid. You're a hypocrite. You're the worst kind of parent. If they say that to me and I'm in this space, what do I hear? What do I see? What do I hear? What do I think's going on?
You got a pretty mean kid that is abusing you.
Yes. So I've reduced that down to they are
The problem.
the problem.
Yeah.
Now look, there's another version of this where I could be in the worst end box, and so they're right, I am the problem. I'm
I
the worst.
deserve all this. I am stupid. I am a hypocrite. I
Yeah.
am worthy of hate.
Yeah. Which means I am the problem, right?
You're right.
So
Both distortions.
So now let's say that child comes to you and you're out of the box, you're not self-deceived, and they say all the same thing. I hate you, you're stupid, worst parent in the world, you're the biggest hypocrite ever, blah, 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 blah. If I'm out of the box, what do I hear?
They have a problem.
You just,
There you go.
I'm writing terribly. They have a problem. And quite frankly, I would put a comma after that, which says, and I might be part of that. But look at the difference between that. This is a V.
Yeah.
Ace. Think
No.
of the difference between they are a problem and they have a problem.
Well, and you've walked me through this before. It's one of my two favorite phrases, the difference in that single word and how much it changes. What I think is really interesting is with each phrase, what's your obligation?
Oh, it's interesting.
Right.
Oh, you think I'm stupid? I'll tell you stupid. Let me tell you stupid you are.
Well,
that's what my obligation of here is.
Your obligation is to endure or to correct this,
Yes.
this bratty child, this annoying problem that you have in your life.
And if I'm under obligation to go tell a lot of other people how hard this is.
All of your obligations are about defending yourself, protecting yourself, correcting them, gaining allies. None of them have to do with possibly wondering if your child needs help.
Oh, I might think they need help.
Right. But you're
They
not
just
going
they need to change.
Right. Yes.
Something
yes.
like that.
Okay, but and by I know you know this, but by they need help. Think about the obligation that intuitively you take on when you say, "My child has a problem."
Yeah, that just feels different.
You intuitively take on a different obligation, which is, I wonder what they need.
Well, I might even start with, I wonder what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know.
What else is happening in their life?
What is the problem that they have?
Yeah. Who else is in their life? I know they think I'm part of that problem, if not the problem, given how they're coming at me. But something's going on, and I think it'd be important to pay attention to this.
And
I'm curious.
I'm
curious.
wildly more open to maybe I am a part of the problem.
Yeah.
Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I need to apologize. Maybe I need, right? Or
Yeah.
if you're not, you're able to see it without getting reactive. You go, like, this isn't about me. They got this other thing going on, or I need to figure out what it is. But now I'm going to go search. Hey, I can hear you're mad at me. Like, tell me about it. What's going on? How's your day going? What's like that? All intuitively, it just comes. It just flows.
Yeah.
From the stance of being out of the box, seeing them as a person, heart of peace, they have a problem. That sets up my response of what I intuitively think my obligation is in that moment. It's to help.
you probably have to cut this out. Terry Warner, when he left finished his PhD at Yale, he went and interviewed at a university back east.
Okay.
He meets with probably the top philosopher in the country at that time. It was his interest in the school. He was a professor there, this philosopher. And so he's interviewing him, and Terry's answering his questions, and it comes around to his religious convictions. And the guy says, so I hear you're this, and Terry says, yes, and he says, well, how would you express that? And he says, well, I have a belief that the scriptures are the word of God. And this philosopher said, that's not a very sophisticated answer. I mean, you read that stuff, you look at the arguments, they're not carefully written out and that sort of thing. It's haphazard. That's just a naive point of view. Mm-hmm. Now, the temptation, I think, there would have been for Terry to defend his point of view, but he doesn't. And the guy says some more things, and Terry said, well, actually, there's a key to understanding the scriptures. You have to yield your heart to them. You have to actually engage with them. So those scriptures, the gospel, if you will, is perfectly protected from somebody who's coming at it analytically, cynically, angrily. It's sort of, you can't get to it that way. You can't see what it is. And so if you're cynical, you just find more reasons to be cynical about it.
Those that have ears to hear.
You have to have a willing heart and a willing mind. And so you have to yield to the word.
And I think that's interesting. I do think that, we're speaking to a broad audience, but I do think that you can tie that in that if you aren't open to hearing something, you're not able to. You know what I mean? And that kind of is what we've been talking about, is that if you're trying to help somebody see that they're the problem.
Or see that they have a problem.
Or that they have a problem, right?
Right.
Thank you. If you're trying to help them do that, what allows them to hear it? And that there is, I like your point a little bit ago. I think that therapists really get in dangerous ground if they think that it's theirs to do that it's theirs to make that change in you.
Oh, yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Well,
I can open a door, I can explore it in a way that maybe makes it easier for you to consider that, but ultimately it's not mine to do. Only one person can choose to hear.
So I got on sort of an introductory call with a client yesterday. He and his wife are separated, and I asked 10 minutes worth of questions, and I said, look, you're trying to figure out if you want me for a therapist, so let me just tell you a story about me. And I tell a story of when Debbie and I get in a pretty good argument.
Yeah.
And I diagram it out. I'm drawing it on a legal pad, and I'm showing it to him, and all the arrows going around, this collusion, we'd call that.
Right. I think you did that in our first episode.
And
Anyway,
this guy's going, that's us completely. And I thought I was just doing this so you could kind of make a decision about whether you'd want me as a therapist or not. Do I sound like I could be helpful? Does this make any sense to you? Or what sense does it make to you? And he saw it immediately, and he's going, oh, my heavens. He said, would it be okay if my wife were to join us on this?
Yeah.
Instead of two people going off, and again, this is another oddity that I find, that each will go to a different therapist. I don't know what they're hearing.
Yeah.
And somehow that's going to put them back together because they're going to learn the standard modalities that all the therapists are going to be teaching. And I'm just going, oh. Now, there are times when they can't be in the room together and they'll just get worse, but that's not always the case. And that was really interesting. He said, I think we could figure this out.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I see in that, I always have loved with Arbinger, one of the key things, I know from having sat in a lot of Arbinger seminars, but also like I've heard, I haven't done it, but when you get trained to be a facilitator, I've heard that they really, correct me, but my understanding is that they really push you towards being able to tell your own story of collusion accurately.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Yes. So the answer to that is yes. In fact, you have to tell your own stories of seeing people as objects, your own stories of self-betrayal, your own stories of carry boxes, your own stories of collusion, and not many stories about you that are good. You tell all the bad stories about you.
Yeah.
And that is really, I'm finding that profound. That just says, you've come to me, client, to tell me you have problems. And I want to see if your problems are like mine.
That's what I find powerful about it. And I think that's back to that Rogerian idea of like, how do you have unconditional positive regard? You find that underneath all our stories, regardless of what the story is, regardless of what the behavior is, regardless of what each specific problem is, it's just a human.
Yes.
Just somebody else that fails in the same way that I fail.
Or similar ways.
It's not the same in the story. It's not the same in the details, but the deeper part of it, like why they failed and why they couldn't see their failings and why they clung to this crazy behavior or to this crazy idea. Why'd they cling to that? Well, have you ever clung to anything that you should have let go of a long time ago and that actually made your life miserable, but you couldn't let it go because you thought, this is my only choice, this is my only option?
Have I told that story about, oh shoot, what's her name? Lene Tozak?
The name sounds familiar. Let's talk about it again.
So I had a girl that I was shadowing. I was a therapist to it on Asazi. 15 or 16, somewhere in there. She'd come from a city out in the west here, and her parents had placed her in the program. And about the second or third week, she got a letter from her sister. And the sister said, and she told me, read me the letter. She said, this is what's in the letter. She said, my boyfriend is now having sex with 3 other girls. And she's telling me that. She says, but I'm not worried about that because I know that he'll want me when I come back.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see her in that moment.
Yeah.
I couldn't, I just thought, you're an idiot. All my judgments got in the way, and I said, hey, you keep thinking about it. I'm gonna wander off. I need to go wander. And so I'm wandering around. I run into this woman, Lene Tozak, and woman from Canada, very bright woman. We later taught her to do the seminars, and she did better than I did. And she didn't have any children. She's teaching parents about how to be better in relationship with children. She doesn't have any children. And I said, Lene, explain the situation. Can you go talk to her? She said, yeah, I can go talk to her. And 4 hours later, I run into Lene again because I've been off here and there in different camps. And I said, how'd that go? And she said, well, when I heard her, I thought about how many times I had done what she had done. That I'd be dating somebody and I'd have a sense, this isn't going to go to good places. This isn't going to go in a way it needs to go. This is not going to be good. I've had a sense to step away from the relationship. And then I betrayed that. So I just told her those stories, several of those. Every time I betrayed that, I had to prove it was right to stay. And she related details about that and how
she proved it.
How she proved it, how messed up it got, and how more painful it became when they finally broke up. And she was distraught for months, if not years. And I went, oh my heavens. It didn't dawn on me for probably another 2 or 3 years how profound that was, what she was doing. I mean, I could go do that in a seminar. That was old hat for me. But why wasn't I doing it as a therapist? Why wasn't I finding where I was doing that sort of thing in my life?
And when it was someone that was maybe appeared different than you. She's a teenager, female, right?
Yeah.
And like all these things that seem different, but I bet if you sat with it, you could find times in your life that you allowed people to mistreat you because you felt like it was loving them, or you needed that love, or I bet if you spent some time, you could find those moments.
Yeah, I had a whole bunch of wretched girls like that, girlfriends.
But you could find yourself in her, but for some reason...
I couldn't see her.
In that moment, you couldn't.
Couldn't do it. Couldn't pull it off.
It's interesting how much we like learn from those moments. I got my own story, which I think I've told it before. Forgive me. Kid on the trail, 14 years old, and at home he had a 14-year-old girlfriend that he had knocked up.
Oh boy.
And, you know, all week long, and I had been working with Anasazi for a while. Chris, I really have a problem with ego. I think I'm good at this stuff, and it's a problem. You know what I mean? And here was the classic example. All week long, I want to validate this part of me that goes like, hey, I'm good at this, and like I help people, and right. And all week long, I'm trying to connect with this kid and to get to some real place and get him to, I don't know, heal. I don't know.
Be a better boy?
Yeah. And he is like a ninja at deflecting that stuff. Right? And he just, by the end of the week, I go, I kind of hate this kid. He doesn't care about anything. He doesn't care about how he affects people.
Not going to care about him.
And so at the end of the week, I really do have a low opinion of this kid. Sandra,
Yeah.
brilliant therapist.
Yep.
And it was early, like in my therapeutic world, these were my first exposures to therapy, right?
Yeah.
But luckily, sometimes the therapist would let me sit in for parts of the session, right? So here comes the therapist, the trained therapist that knows what they're actually doing. And sits down and starts talking with him. And I can't remember, it's been a long time, but I can't remember how it led into it. But somewhere they start talking about how he had smoked marijuana. And in my brain, I go, marijuana, big deal. Who cares? That's nothing compared to knocking up your teenage girlfriend. You know what I mean? And he looks down at the ground. I didn't notice it because I didn't even see a person in front of me, right? Sandra notices. I get emotional every time I talk about this. Sandra notices. And she gets quiet. She doesn't say anything else. And she waits a second. And then she goes, hey, look at me. This kid who I had decided was like a full sociopath, but didn't have empathy or feelings, picks up his head, locks eyes, and just shatters. Mm-hmm. And he says, I used to have good friends, but then I started hanging out with the kids that made bad decisions and that smoked weed, and my good friends wouldn't talk to me anymore. And he cried.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I thought, oh, here he is sobbing about smoking some weed and feeling rejected by these kids. And it's not that he doesn't care about the mistakes he's made and who he's affected. It's that he cares too much to be able to sit with it. But I couldn't see that because he wouldn't connect with me. He didn't respond to my magic. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Anyway.
If we don't get over there, I don't know why we expect them to come all the way over here.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can't legitimately hold a space where you think you might be just like me and you might be forgivable and maybe you're just trying to figure out how to navigate a hard world that's full of suffering and it's confusing.
Yeah.
And it's and I don't get it all the time and I don't know what to do in each moment. And sometimes I do just the worst thing possible, like what I did to that kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was interesting. I had another trail walker tell me a story similar to that there was a kid on the trail and they were hiking down some canyon, and it was really hard. He had brand new boots, and he didn't want to walk in the water, which everybody else was doing. So he's slow. He's sort of slipping along the sides of a fairly steep canyon, little arroyo, and the trail walker with him is just going, ay, 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 ay. And he said, look, a lot easier to come down here. Why don't you do this? Your boots will dry out, blah, blah, blah. And he just, no, I got to protect them. We don't have much money, and my dad had to work extra to get these for me, and I really want to honor that. And he's rolling his eyes. This goes on for a couple of hours, and they're way behind the other guys. And finally the therapist said, in his heart, he says, I got to be at peace with this. This is nuts on my part. I'm okay if he wants to walk it. I don't have to. I can just be here with him. Within 10 minutes, the kid says, this is crazy. I'm going to walk in the water. Okay. Well, they come in. It's on Canyon Creek. So they come into a place which is right near where I don't know if you ever down there, they used to call it Little Hawaii. It's a beautiful place, big sandbar. And anyway, he's in cargo shorts and got his pack on. And he comes up out of the sand, and another kid, this angry kid, who I also tell the story about at other times, is so angry at him. He comes up to this kid who's now coming out of the water with this pack. And the other kid's really angry. He says, you're making our lives miserable. What's wrong with you? And he hits him in the chest and knocks him back into the water.
Oh, jeez.
Pack and all.
Yeah.
Right. And as he's telling the story, I'm thinking, oh, man, wet blankets for the night, that's going to be rough. How can you get them out and get them dried? And he says, and the kid gets up, and he scrambles over to the shore, and he throws his pack off, doesn't pay any attention to that. And he reaches into those, they have the pockets on the side of the cargo pants. He's opening those up on both sides, and he's pulling out these letters from his family that are soaking wet. And he's quoting the letters. He only has a few, like 10 or so. He's been out for 6 weeks.
Sure.
And he's quoting them, and he's putting them down. He's putting little pebbles so they can dry out in the sand, and that's what he's painting. And the other kids come over, and they start helping him. Somebody gets his pack, takes his blanket, and gets that drying out. And the other kid, the angry kid's,
Yeah.
And the trail walker said, I was melted completely. I could never have a bad feeling against that kid again. But I could have a bad feeling about that kid.
Right.
That was always the challenge, that as soon as I could see someone's humanity, everything changed. There was a girl on the trail, young girl, 13. She'd really made some bad choices and ended up down on Jefferson Avenue down in Phoenix, which is where the prostitutes are.
Yeah.
Ended up in a hotel with a couple of guys, and really rough life. And while she was on the trail, she just lied all the time about everything. I'm pretty sure someone's tracking me out here. And we're going, no, I don't think so. And she'd lie about this. No, they said it was okay if I go over to the boys' group. Just constant. And so I had gotten a little nickname for her, which was Two Tongues.
Work it out.
Okay. And I remember coming into her camp like 3 weeks in, and she said, I can't. I said, well, you don't have a fire. Where's your fire? And I said, I can't make it. This equipment I have is bunk, and it's just a problem, and it doesn't work. And so I took her bow drill and stuff and made a coal.
Yeah.
Blew it into flame. And she started gathering wood, and I stomped it out because she should do it herself. It was really magnanimous in that moment. Well, at that point, I sort of realized she had to hate me. And so on the fourth week, I go in, and all the trail walkers are telling me, yeah, she just lies and lies and lies. And never able to get a fire. And I had carved in some of that green Arizona marble, I'd carved a feather. And I took it to her and I said, I want to give you a gift, but I want to tell you what it's about. my heart has not been right towards you, and I've had a nickname for you that's really demeaning, and I just kind of unloaded what was going on, and I said, I'm sorry I've done that. I think it's been mean. I think you felt it. I'm pretty sure you felt it. I've been condescending, etc. And I apologize for that, but I wanted to give you this gift, and I gave her the gift of the feather, and she was pretty excited about that, tied it up, and she says, well, I'm curious, this was her 5th week. She said, I'm curious, am I going home next week? And I said, no. Well, how come? And, well, your parents are concerned because you lie. And she said, okay, I'll stop. And I said, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I said, she says, what do you mean? I said, well, if I stole $100 from you 6 months ago, and I haven't given it back to you, I'm still stealing it from you. And if I lied to you a year ago, and I haven't corrected that and told you I lied and tell you what the real truth is, I'm still lying to you. I'm carrying that lie. And she just started to cry. And she said, I've told a lot of lies. A lot of lies. It's just what I do. I said, well, the nice part is you can tell the truth about them. And she said, but I've told a lot of lies. And I said, well, just get to it. Your parents would like to hear what they were. That would really help in the healing. And she said, okay. She finished one of those steno pad notebooks. She filled that, and she had little tiny writing.
Oof.
Tiny writing.
A lot of lies.
2 on each line.
Yeah.
Would go across. And they were simple ones like, I ate food in my room when I wasn't supposed to. But then she got into the serious ones about heading down to Phoenix, running away and that stuff. And so for 3 days, she wrote. From morning to night, morning to night, morning to night. Would think of it, get up, go over and start writing. Get 4 or 5 down, come back, sit down and do stuff. And finally she says, I can't remember them all, but I think this is a fair representation. She filled a steno book and a half a steno book.
Yeah.
Filled, front and back, every page.
Yeah.
Except for the other half.
What a sincere effort.
So, Trailwalker calls me on the satellite phone. Said, I have to tell you something. This little girl's never been able to make a fire. She wrote all those lies out. I called her parents and I read them to her. After 45 minutes, they said, it is enough. We're coming next week. She said, but that little girl went over and picked up her fire set, made a coal, blew it into flames, stomped it out, did it again, did it again, did it again, did it again. And I said, in my personal experience, whenever I've tried to prove something to people by how good I was at making fire, nature resisted me. But when my heart was right, nature helped me. She said, I'm going to go tell her that. So her parents came on the lone walking, and first she had 2 sets. They were divorced and remarried. So a day and a half with one set, day and a half with the second. I went to each. And each time I came in, she says, I can make fire. I'll show you. She knew that had become the symbol of there's a real change. There's a fire lit inside me. And I don't ever not want to be able to do this.
Well, it tells me the lies. The thought I have is that the lies that she told all sparked from a deeper lie that she wasn't good enough.
Or was unacceptable, or people weren't accepting her.
Can't do things. I can't make a fire.
I can't keep my parents together.
And when she stopped, she didn't stop lying. She didn't just stop lying outwardly. She stopped lying inwardly. And she said, "I'm capable of something. I can do things. In fact, I can do them well. I can start that fire, and it can be such a small thing that I can put it out and do it again." Which, for people that don't know, starting a fire with friction is not an easy task, especially if you haven't practiced it a lot.
So a month ago, a young man who's here this afternoon, my grandson, Kingsley, he and his friend were here, and I said, "Would you guys want to learn how to make fire?" I'm 74. I was wheezing. I finally got a coal. I put it in the tinder and I blew it and blew it and nothing happened. And smoke's filling the garage. So
Okay.
I put it on the ground. I go over and I raise the garage door up and the wind blows it into flames. I said, "See?" And they laughed. They said, "Yeah, you couldn't do it alone, could you?"
Right.
Whenever I think about those stories of not being able to connect with their humanity, not being there for them, it always was about me. And I remember thinking about how I was going to defend why they hadn't changed. So I began, one of the things I thought about earlier, when you talk about how to have that relationship, I've wrestled with that a lot, probably because it's been a concern for me, is whenever I have someone comes to me to therapy, I think at this point I fairly well have this within me. My job is to work hard. Whether they change is not part of my job. I can't measure that as success. That I'm just grateful for and glad they're having that experience. But I don't measure myself on whether they change. I measure myself whether I really work hard with them.
Yeah.
And I know the experience. If I meet with someone for 55 minutes and it's gone like that, we've been working hard. And there's other times where I'm going, "Oh my heavens, it's only 10:24." And I have to go, I've lost. I don't have a connection with this person.
Yeah.
I'm not able to help them.
Yeah.
So some of it has to do, I know part of that connection has to do with seeing their humanity, forgetting, well, not holding this need to have them change or do something amazing that impresses them, or I can tell a story about them later. That's always the wrong way to be in the relationship. I want to just be there for them. And what's funny is I find I invent things to do. So many sessions I invent things to do and can't remember them 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
In the next session, I know I just did something. What was that? I can't remember. It's not something to then go do again.
Because it was for them.
Just for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that once again, all the way back to the beginning when you said, "I need to care."
I need to care.
And I go, "Oh, I can do that." Like, can I know everything about therapy?
No.
Can I know everything about humanity and humans and humankind and each person?
No.
I can care.
I can care.
I can do that.
Yeah.
And people talk a lot about, and you like it's a big topic in therapy, around therapy circles, is like people getting burned out. And I think that comes from making it about yourself.
So if I work hard. I never take it home if I work hard.
Right. If I
Just
know
don't.
that I gave them my full heart for that hour, and I sincerely tried to be helpful, and I was tuned in, and I didn't bring in baggage from wherever, it was about them for an hour. Whether they pick it up or not, or they're able to do something, or they have an insight, I hope for an insight, of course. But if they don't, I can feel okay. And that does extrapolate to outside of therapy into relationships. If I do what I think is right, I can be okay even in difficult relationships, even when those around me struggle, and maybe even struggle in a way that like is directed at making my life hard. Like they struggle aggressively towards me, right? If it goes back to the bonds that make us free, Terry Warner line, we're angry with others not because of their mistreatment of us, but because of our mistreatment of them, which is a hard line to sit with. If you can, it's the most freeing experience ever that you are the master of your life, the master of your relationships, the master of your emotions. And when you truly just do what you think is right, you'll be okay.
You'll be okay.
Even if people you love struggle, and even if people you love struggle towards you.
Yep. Yep. That's it's the most beautiful lesson when you, on occasion, we come across these stories where people were able to do that under very difficult circumstances. You have the Corrie ten Boom in the death camp in Auschwitz in World War II. You have Viktor Frankl that you mentioned earlier. There was a Frenchman, Jacques Lucirand, the blind Frenchman, who, as a teenager, a blind teenager, created and ran the largest resistance movement against the Nazi-occupied Paris during World War II. A blind teenager ran that.
The same blind teenager was put in Buchenwald, the concentration camp, and as a blind man, made himself so valuable because he spoke 7 languages?
Yeah.
Made himself so valuable that he survived a concentration camp.
Yeah. How did a completely blind man, no eyes, do that? Yeah. Those stories, those people came out of there. Others came out. If you read Elie Wiesel's book Night, you realize he came out in a very different way. But so many had these stunning experiences, and those are terrible experiences. They were mistreated terribly.
Yeah.
And people around them died because of that.
Yeah.
And they still made effort to see the humanity of those individuals and to not hate. There was a book written in the 50s called Return from Tomorrow by George Ritchie. And as a soldier, he had died and had I don't know, what do you call those? Out-of-body life, a death experience, and came back. Near death, thank you.
Yeah.
And he goes over, and he's one of these death camps, and they're now the Americans are there. They're trying to help, and as they're doing that, he says, I meet this man, this Polish man who speaks about 5 languages, and he's helping us repatriate these people back to where they're from, and he's able to talk to them and get all this. And I look at him, and he says, you, how long have you been in? You haven't been here very long. You look pretty good. And he says, oh, I'm here since 1939, September of 1939. And he says, I got to know him. He told me, he had this Polish name, 7 syllables that he could never remember, but he said, I'm a Jew, and I was captured, my wife and my 4 children, and they lined them up on the roadway and they machine gunned them to death. He said, I'm a lawyer by trade, and I've seen conflict. And in that moment, as I saw it unfold, I was telling myself, I have to forgive. If I don't, I know how badly my life will become. How horrible my life will become.
See, how did he already know that?
Because he'd been working as a lawyer with conflict all the time.
Yeah.
So somehow, but I know lawyers who work with conflict and don't learn that, right?
Well, because they didn't do it the way he did it.
He knew he could not hate. Let's at least say that much. And he would, and George Ritchie would say, it'd be late and dark, and we're, with candles flickering, and the guy would say, oh, we've got time for this next man. It's never about him.
It reminds me of, and I've told this story before on here, but I'm going to do it again. Adam Miller talks about spending the last night with his father before his dad passed away, and then waking up to a world without his beloved father.
Oh, wow.
Right? And having this moment where anger started to build. Right? And he goes, wait, I got to read this because I got to memorize it. I'm going to butcher this. Something to the effect of, you can't win life, only love it.
You can't win life.
or beat it. Meaning,
Yeah.
meaning like his father's dead, and he could be angry, and he could go, "Why, God? Why do I have to live in a world without my beloved father who I love?" And it's interesting because he felt it well up in him, and the way he tells the story, you know that he had to learn that lesson a long time ago in his life, and then he'd had to practice it. But now in this moment when it was big, when that hurt and that resentment and that loss could have consumed him, he had that. And he was able, it was like a practiced muscle that he had practiced before. And he was able to go, don't do it. Don't hate. Love. Right? And I hear that even more profoundly in your story of him watching his family be murdered and going, don't. He feels it. It speaks to him for a second. He goes,
Oh, yeah. In order to resist it, it has to come.
right. He goes, oh, there it is. Hate, resentment, misery. He goes, don't do it. Forgive. It's really, and that's the value of suffering. That's Viktor Frankl's "Are you worthy of your suffering?" Somewhere in all of those conflicts that lawyer had sat with, he had gone, oh, this is miserable, and it only goes one direction.
Worse.
Yeah. Hate and anger and misery only feeds itself.
Yeah.
You gotta go the other direction. And he had that. And then when it presented to him in the biggest, scariest, most profound moment of his life, somehow, to me, that's miraculous. To me, that's as dark and evil as the world is. That story tells me that love's more powerful. Because it's inconceivable.
It was interesting that when Richie was there a while, because there was a lot of people, he said, as I heard the stories and what had happened, I began to realize, given all those horror stories, I needed something to counteract that. I needed to have hope. And he said they would be lined up along the fence. There was no more gates and they were not locked anymore, but they would still be in line waiting to go there. And he said I would take a break and I'd go down the line of these men, and then same with the women, but I'd just go down them and look them in the face and then find the next one and the next one, until when I looked into the face of someone, I saw the face of God. Then I could go back to work. There must have been something remarkable about those individuals. Some individuals in those death camps, in those torture camps, in those brutality camps, that he could just look at a person's face and see this thing you and I are trying to capture and talk about.
Yeah.
He could see that in them.
Yeah.
So I have a poem that I really do want to share. It is a remarkable poem. And the context of it is, this time the concentration camp is Ravensbrück. Okay? So as I read in the book, it was the book by Mary Craig. She wrote a book called Blessings. I think it was a manuscript. I'm not sure it was ever published. But she's talking about these death camps. It's right after World War II. She's trying to do some humanitarian work, going over and trying to find the people and be helpful to them. And they find this prayer. It's just on a scrap of paper, and it's actually they found it in the hand of a child who had died. So a little 4 or 5 year old child who has this prayer, who's carrying it. Somebody else must have written it. This is what it says. O Lord, remember not only the men and women of goodwill, but also those of ill will. But do not remember all the suffering they have inflicted on us. Remember instead the fruits we have bought thanks to the suffering, our comradeship, our loyalty, our humility, our courage, our generosity, the greatness of heart, which has grown out of all of this. And when those of ill will come to judgment, let all the fruits which we have borne be their forgiveness.
Ah. So the value that they found in their suffering, the humanity, the compassion, the way it expanded and grew them, may that be the tax on what they did. May that be the price paid. May that level the scales.
Yeah, I don't know if that's how God works, but I see forgiveness in this.
Well,
I see a lack of hate. I feel a lack of having to carry a story about how bad they were. They acknowledged they were bad. They were people of ill will.
I don't believe in a scale leveling, in a system of weighing your good versus your bad. I don't believe in that, but I do believe in somebody saying what they did to me, I don't hold them accountable for. Yeah. When I interact with this world, and it's, I don't know, maybe the way that's the best for me, or the most pure, or the way that I think works the best, I don't live here. In fact, I have to work really hard to have moments where I connect with this. But everything is love. It's all opportunity to do good, and it all teaches me something, and it all, even the wrong things we do come from an attempt to do right, or an attempt to be good. And all of a sudden I go, oh, like, it's not like good versus evil, suffering versus beauty. It's
us versus them.
Us versus them. It's all just good. And I don't know, I have times when I'm talking to people that I can like articulate this well, like we get into this subject a couple times in therapy. I've done it with people that like I can really, it's almost like I can't even talk about this accurately unless I'm there.
Yeah.
But I do believe that the world is just good, and just opportunity and beauty around you.
Well, that's that comment that Thomas McConkie makes. Okay. I believe that conflict is a gift.
Yeah.
Because if we will go within, that first step, start within, start inside.
What's he say? Stay close.
Stay close. This poem from
Stay
David
right
White.
Here. Yeah.
Start with my own pain. Start with my own joy. Start with my own frustration.
Stay close and do not go afar off. It's not the first step or the second.
Just don't take the second step. Don't take the third step.
Yeah. Stay close.
Stay close.
It's right here. You're okay.
Yeah. Or even if you have pain, start with that.
Yeah. Stay right here.
Stay right here.
Don't try to say it's because of this or because of that or because of him or her or them. Say why is it there? Stay close. That's a really beautiful line. Stay close.
Stay close.
Yeah.
Because we want to range out there and, them over there and them over there and them over there.
Well, my running theory is that we have such a strong desire to be good that when we interact with the mistakes we make, we have such a low tolerance for that, because to me it's because we want to be good. Really, our mistakes are driven by the most beautiful part of us, that we want to be good, and that we haven't learned how to tolerate the fact that we're not good at it yet.
We're not good at it yet. We're not that good.
But it's all driven, like all of our suffering is an inability to sit with the fact that we're not good, which is evidence of our goodness.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Debbie and I had a really interesting interaction with a young woman recently that she had learned some news which was really hopeful for a family member, but was just really distressing to her.
Okay.
Because she didn't ever see her, became hopeless, never saw herself having that opportunity, and just, and she said, I know you guys want to just try and take this pain away from me, but I need to sit with it. Would you be willing to let me sit with it? And we said, of course we would. And the next morning she wrote us a note, and she said, thank you for letting me do that. And then all of a sudden, what's coming out of her was this amazing stuff, this very articulate way that I'm really excited for my family member. And yes, I'm sorrowing too, but it doesn't quench that joy I have for them. And all of a sudden she had gone and stayed close in.
Yeah.
And stuck with it and just let it be there and called it into question or whatever she did.
I think that often we're so uncomfortable with other people's suffering that we don't try to understand it. You know what I mean?
Well, for me, for a long time, when I heard the problems others had, I distanced myself. Well, I'm not like that.
Or try to solve it quickly. Or yeah, that's not me.
That's not me. Oh, that's bad.
Right. Which I think if there was a theme to our conversation today is, that's me.
It is me.
Like everyone's mistakes, everyone's suffering, that's me.
So this is decades ago. I was quite intrigued with Taoism. There were some things that really spoke to me. I speak about it now, but I'm sure that somebody really knows would go, oh, Chris, you don't know what you're talking about. But overly simplistically, I think they would say that everyone I meet is my teacher. But they're not teaching me about that. They're teaching me about me. So if I run into someone and they're really an annoying jerk, a twat, whatever you want to call them, I don't know what the horrible language is.
Yeah.
Is that really a bad one?
Well, it just reminds me of a long time ago. I didn't know I literally didn't know what it meant, but I used the word prick in front of you once.
Oh.
And I was referring to someone, and you like kind of, because you did know what that word means. And you went, Carl, I don't think we need to like express ourselves there. You corrected me in some way. And I was like, what is that? And then I found out, I was like, oh yeah, no, that's pretty aggressive language. So it made me laugh to hear you say twat, which was kind of
Same thing. Yeah. All right.
super funny to me.
So
Sorry, that was very
So let's say, we'll keep it more simple. So I meet somebody and they're really irritating and annoying and they're self-absorbed. And
right.
They're just a jerk. Okay.
Yeah.
The question that Taoism would have me ask is not, why is that person such an annoying jerk, such a hypocrite? It's that, why am I irritated and annoyed with this very irritating and annoying person? And I love that question. That keeps me close in.
Yeah.
What is going on here? How come I'm having this response?
And once again, there's this extreme. There's a Navy SEAL that's kind of popular that has a podcast. His name's Jocko Willenick, but he wrote a book called Extreme Ownership, and he's high up in the teams where he's like in leadership position for like Navy SEALs. Anyway, the book's called Extreme Ownership, and it's what you just talked about. Why am I annoyed with this very annoying person? That's owning you are the one having the emotion.
That's right.
And that's so uncomfortable. Like I don't like it when you say that, Chris, because I have to be accountable for, I have to own that it's me. It's not the annoying person, it's me being annoyed.
Yeah.
But if I can own that, if I can have that kind of extreme ownership, I am a powerful, powerful human in the world. Yeah. Meaning, like, if I'm annoyed, I'm never the victim of another. You talked about earlier, before we started, you talked about like a lot of clients coming in and saying triggered.
Yeah,
I'm triggered.
I'm triggered. That when they do that, I'm triggered. When she does that, I'm triggered. When
They're doing this to me. And the thing that they're not acknowledging is they're saying, when they do that, I'm a powerless entity in the world.
yeah, it's a victimhood.
I'm a victim of them.
All this external, all these, and they're all these external causes do exist.
Right. And
Comma.
well, and there's a world where, yes, you are a victim. The question is there another world where you're powerful? And which one do you want to live in?
I'd probably come at that a little different. That's an interesting way to come at it. But I don't want to lose these thoughts. Real victimization does happen. But given how I uptake that, how I respond to that, dictates the quality of my life. My friend Jim Farrell says, the most important thing that happens to us in this life is mistreatment, because how we respond to that dictates the quality of our life. Okay, it's a very nice thought. It's a right thought. So if I'm triggered, then I'm locating, again, like Thomas, I'm locating the responsibility for this conflict over there. But if I start close in, if I start with extreme ownership, was that his language?
Yes.
If I start there, then I have to look at what's going on with me. That's fascinating to me. Let's go back to this page. If I'm here in this box, I'll experience victimization one way. If I'm here, I'll experience victimization another way.
Beautiful. In the box, out of the box. It's a different experience.
It's a different experience. Because notice it's right here. This is mistreatment. Most of us would agree that. Let's say that my child stole money from my wallet. They stole my credit card. They stole my car and wrecked it. Whatever, it's mistreatment. I get that. How I experience it varies between where I stand. Am I here? Am I here? So if I'm in the box,
okay,
I'm going to be, what a problem they are to me, how triggering they are.
Can I give you a phrase and have you in the box, out of the box it for me?
Okay.
A victim. And let's say something that universally people go, that's like horrific, like someone sexually assaulted or something.
Right.
Because of what happened to me, finish it in the box, finish it out of the box.
Yeah, I will. If I'm in the box, because of what happened to me, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't succeed. I'll go through life with these.
I'll never be the same.
I'm emotionally scarred. I'll never be able to forget this. If anyone suggests that I'm going to get over it, it's just absurd. How could I ever forget that I was raped, that I was sexually assaulted, that I was molested? How could I ever forget those things? But what they don't realize about that sort of scar theory stuff is that what we've been talking about is really quite different, that how I'm thinking about what happened to me is something I keep with me from moment to moment. How I think and feel about it is what I'm doing in my present moment. And I can do something about that. Because you can't retrieve the past. I can't go back and make the rape disappear. I can't make it not happen. But what I can do is address my response to being mistreated in that way. Because if I'm still angry and upset about it, I'm carrying something. So one of the questions I found is sort of fascinating. And I have people some people answer in the affirmative to this question, but I sort of doubt that you could ever answer it in the affirmative. Do you take offense at every offense that comes your way?
No, I don't. And good gracious, I hope, like, every time I don't, I'm so happy I did it.
Yeah, but look, it's here. When I'm not taking offense, when offense comes my way, I'm here.
Right.
So that question actually, if it's true that I don't take offense at every offense, it implies choice, not cause.
Right, and that's the question is it always a choice? Right? That's kind of what we're playing with.
Yeah.
Is we know that we've experienced it before, because I think most people would say, I don't take offense to every offense that comes my way. So we know that sometimes you don't.
And sometimes I do.
and sometimes we do.
Yeah.
Is that a flip of the cards?
No. I think it reveals what I'm still carrying.
Amplitude, or is it always our choice? And what we're, at least in the story you told of the gentleman whose family was murdered before being sent to a death camp, to me, that's a pretty heavy example of maybe it's difficult often.
Yeah.
But there's a choice in there. And somehow he made the choice to not take offense when offense was given.
So this is what.
And is he better off for it?
Yes, he would. Anyone who met him would say yes. So, so let's compare that, which is horrific, with me taking offense as we're trying to leave California and get to the airplane on time in a way that we're not going to miss the flight, and my wife is dawdling. I'm as offended at that as if somebody killed my dog. What's amazing to me is being offended at a small thing, I have the same angry, self-righteous response that I'm this disbelief about how you could do this to me. That it's as big. And I'm going, what do I do? I don't have anything difficult to deal with, so I'm getting offended at little things? I find that odd. Why would I be so? Well, I think I have a habit in my life that there's certain ways, certain judgments I still carry about how people should or should not treat me that I've never really resolved fully. And so I step into new situations and something happens that are already pre-explained as offensive and ruinous and unkind to me, and they shouldn't have been acting this way. And this is habitual. I'm just doing it again, but I'm carrying it with me. I'm carrying this readiness, anticipatory readiness to take offense at certain kinds of things.
Well, and that's why you notice the absurdity of it. You're saying that you got as angry with your wife for moving a little slowly when really you had plenty of time, as angry as if she had done a major offense like killing your beloved dog or something.
Or missing the flight.
Or like it actually caused you to miss the flight, right? But the amplitude of that is because, yeah, it's a carried response. Sometimes I think we carry, with certain people, I have a way of responding to the accumulation of their entire life's work in each offense. Does it make sense?
You say it again.
And I talked about this last time with my dad.
Yes.
He can do something I find offensive, and I can feel mistreated, and I will respond to every mistreatment he's ever given me.
Yeah.
It's another pebble on Everest, on the Everest of my grievances.
When I think about that, again, I think about being in the box. So if here I am, I'm going to draw it three-dimensionally. Here I am in the box in my current moment. This is the present moment. And so now all of a sudden I get fussed and I'm upset with somebody, my wife or my child or my dad or whomever. If I begin to think, or let me say it this way. When I'm here, what memories of the past come to me?
Well, only one that support your position of who you are and how you're wronged.
That's right. So all the bad ones that support that, justify my current moment, that's what surfaces.
That's what the past becomes from that place. From your present dictates the past.
So and if I'm in the box in this moment, what do I imagine the future to be?
Yeah, it's going to be the same.
More of the same. But if I'm out of the box, what memories come to mind in the interactions with people?
Life. Just everything.
The good and the bad.
Yeah.
And the future? Possibilities.
Just possibilities, yeah.
So again, for me, it's am I in this space where I'm shifting responsibility for me, for my life, for who I am, who I can be or who I can't be? Am I shifting that onto others and circumstances and all sort of matter of things? Or am I living in the present moment, doing what I can right now, wishing I could do more, but just being able to do what I can?
It makes me think of that young walker that I've told you about before that got mad at the other young walker. This kid was smart. He was really smart. Like, I like talking to him. Young kid, but he was smart. But in the moment, he says, I deserve to be angry. And it's like it's this thing you're trying to achieve. Like what I'm trying to achieve in life is being angry. But
Wow.
right? But I think that's what happens when you're in the box
Oh, yeah, I
present.
feel that here.
You actually feel like you need a reason to cling to that anger, and therefore you actually are committed to a future of anguish. Because then why would the phrase "I deserve my anger"? I deserve to be angry. I think in the box that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And out of the box, it's the most absurd
Absurd.
statement ever.
Yeah.
But I've been angry before. Why would I say I deserve this? Because I need to be justified in hating whoever I'm angry with.
Yeah.
And then I deserve it. They did this to me.
Yeah.
It's okay that I hate. Out of the box, I don't want to hate anyway. And being angry is miserable.
Yeah.
And I
Why
want
do we
good
want to
relationships.
Why would we ever want to be justified in feeling miserable?
Yeah. Why would it? Yeah.
So I've noticed that when I'm here in this box, in this space, that, like, I don't like mistreatment, right? But when I'm mistreated, it's actually delicious because I find innocence in being mistreated by others. So if they do that, I can shift it and say, yeah, well, see,
Excuse.
see, right there. What am I supposed to love that? I'm supposed to love that jerk?
See, and to me, this gives more credibility to the argument that what we're really trying to do is be okay with the fact that we made a mistake. I need you to mistreat me because it excuses what I did wrong.
Yeah.
And it's painful, especially like someone you love. Who have you ever been the most angry with?
Closest.
People you love the most.
Closest loves.
You mistreat somebody you love, it deeply goes against your morals and values.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
And I think that's so painful for us that somehow we would rather, in a moment of absurdity, in a moment of deception, we would rather hate them and have it be their fault that we're carrying hatred and anger towards someone we love than just sit with the fact that we made a mistake.
And sometimes I hate, and sometimes I get angry.
I hate and I get angry, but I don't have to stay there.
Yeah.
That's the moment you come out. Oh, it did happen. I was in the wrong. I did mistreat someone I love.
Yeah.
And the minute that you can just sit with that, you don't have to be there anymore.
One of the perplexities, or one of the challenges to this, because one way to talk about this, you're talking about two very different paradigms,
Okay.
ways of seeing the world and how things work.
Yeah.
Well, the difficulty is, whichever world I'm in the box or out of the box, we use the same language. If I'm in the box, that language, all the language I would use to trying to describe the new moment is already used in a way to justify the box.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a hard thing to do to ever change paradigms because all my language is embedded in the paradigm and how I use my language. Am I making sense?
I'm thinking of intent. My purpose and intent when I'm in the box is to justify my wrong actions. My purpose and intent.
Give myself a pass. Get me
Right.
off the hook.
My intent when I'm out of the box is to love others and to be as good as I can be.
And take responsibility for
and
when
to
I'm
take
not.
responsibility when I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you were trying to express, but I'm picturing that everything, every thought, every belief, every word, everything that someone else says, everything that I think, all goes through this system, this distortion, this lens that only has one purpose, and that's to excuse your behavior.
Yeah.
Where I find hope is, I think that you're wanting to excuse that behavior because at your core you're good.
Yeah, because it troubles. I'm troubled.
I'm troubled that I did that. I'm troubled that I am in conflict with someone I love.
Yeah.
And I can't sit with that. And it's easier for me to say it's not my fault because it's unbearable that it might be.
Yeah.
That I might have done that.
Yeah. And yet,
It's an interesting paradox. My personal belief is that in the box behavior is driven by goodness.
or a want to be good, or a distorted goodness.
It's not good.
No, it's not good.
The behavior's not good,
But I want to be.
but it's driven by the suffering or the inability to sit with or to consider that that I did a bad thing, that I hurt someone I love. That's driven by morality.
Yeah.
That's driven by, I want to love others and I want good relationships and I want to do good in the world, and I can't stand that it's possible that I'm not doing that. Do you get what I'm saying?
That I fall short. I fall terribly
Right.
short.
But what gives me hope is even in the box, I think is driven by the best parts of us,
Yeah,
the most beautiful parts of us.
that it actually, that we're troubled by being there, and how we act within actually reveals that we're troubled by it. We're not okay with what we're doing. We're striving. We're
Yeah.
writhing.
I tell clients all the time, the fact that they'll tell me their story and how miserable they are and how hard it is. And I'll go, well, those are all hard things. That's not weird to me that that's hard for you. What would freak me out is if you didn't care at all, or it didn't affect you, or it wasn't hard.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
That would freak me out.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh. But the fact that you had a hard experience and it's hard for you, it's another one of those places where we have all these diagnoses and we call them disorders. There's very few mental health experiences that I would actually call a disorder. There's a few, but like depression, I almost never interact with depression where I go, well, that's a disorder. I go, no, that's order. You should be miserable where you're at.
Yeah, given what you've been through,
Yeah, and also like,
what you're going through.
and the way that you're responding to it.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. It's one possible way.
Yeah, but it's normal. If things are hard to feel miserable, why do we call that a disorder?
Oh, that's interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Now, we don't want to live there. Let's get out of there. But calling it a disorder,
So-
it's normal to like that's how you should feel. If life's hard, miserable is how you should feel. That's normal.
So I hear this sort of suggestion behind all of that, which is, according to the DSM-5, if we're not living just wonderfully spontaneous and authentic and everything, that we're a mess, we're troubled, and that's what we should be getting to. But the truth is, this life is hard. People die and accidents happen, and I just, just recently, within the last week in this country and around the world, terrible things have happened. I don't know how to be indifferent to that. It troubles me.
And would that be more human if you could be?
No, less human.
And would it be a sign of beauty in your life if you could not care about the suffering of others?
No, it would not be a sign of beauty. It would be a sign of, who are you, and Chris, and what are you doing on this planet? You're not getting the point here.
Yeah.
These are just like you. These are real people with real struggles, and 79 of them just got killed trying to get food in a war zone. Somebody was in the apartment building and it got bombed. I cannot imagine what that would be like, and how they have to try to pick up the shambles of their lives. I don't know how to be indifferent to that.
And how much,
what would have to be dead in my life?
exactly, how much smaller, how much less. That's the interesting thing. Like, once again, that is tragedy, and it's painful to sit with. It's driven by the love inside you, right? It's always this. We're getting close to what I was talking about earlier. It's always driven by beauty, but it's hard to always sit with that because it's tragedy.
It is tragedy.
But the fact that that is hard for you, and that it's hard for anyone to sit with, that's what's right with the world.
That's an interesting point. I like that.
We shouldn't be trying to fix that in people. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
I want you to respond that way. You ought to be troubled by this. It ought to affect you.
yeah, it ought to make your soul sorrow. But that sorrow should speak to the beauty inside you and the beauty in all the world.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting side comment about the DSM-5.
Yeah. There's a few that I'm like, that's a disorder. Like, schizophrenia is a disorder.
Well, we share a client.
Yeah, bipolar is a disorder.
That is a crazy
that client
thing.
is an amazing human, very good person,
Yeah.
who did some wild stuff, and it wasn't his fault. His brain did something that took agency from him.
Malfunctioned.
Yeah, it malfunctioned. That's a disorder.
Yeah.
Depression, anxiety, the one that we always love to talk about, borderline personality. Those are not disorders. Those are how you're supposed to feel when that's happening, and when you're trying to navigate hard things in a way that doesn't work, but trying to do it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
You know. Anyway. Well, any other thoughts? You wanna keep going? Is this a good moment, or what are you thinking about?
All the way back to your kind of the question, one of the questions we started in the beginning with, what qualifies me to be in a room with somebody who has problems? And I still feel I have to care, I have to see their humanity. There has to be a goodness within me. I have to be living a life in such a way that that can come forward. And I have to disabuse myself of needing to fix them. I love the idea a gentleman wrote one time where he said, when we have a friend come to us and they're really struggling, and sometimes we just want to tell them, well, a bunch of stuff, right? This sort of convey, well, this will be good experience for you, or this will pass. We'll get past this. When it's a really tough thing. I had some people in our neighborhood whose their 19-year-old daughter took her life. And I can't imagine saying something like to them.
Yeah, right.
It feels pretty aggressive. And this individual, when he was talking about it, says it conveys this, it seems to very clearly to convey the idea that I'm going to be okay with you staying around me if you'll get over this. But he said, that doesn't feel right. What feels right is I'll stay with you in this darkness. I can stay with you. And this can be painful and hard, and I won't run away from it. I'm not going to be afraid because I have hope about possibilities and things. But right now, I think what you need from me is I'll sit with you in it. I'll be here with you.
And I do, and even earlier when we were talking about like sexual assault, even hypothetically, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I have a hard time with this because I always am like, what's it like to hear two men pontificate about how you shouldn't, you know what I mean? But I really hope that I can capture both, that it is everything you're feeling. it is that awful. But I don't want it to just be that, because if that's it, what are we doing? What are we talking about? Like, why do I always tell clients, I go, if that's all that there is, why did you come here today?
That's right. If you're insistent that it cannot be in any other way.
Why? And so then I go, well, I want to acknowledge that it really is as horrible as you say. Could it be anything else? And what could it be? And what if it could be the person who assaulted me is the one carrying the burden of hurting another human? I did nothing wrong and have nothing to carry.
Unless I resent, then I carry.
Then.
Yeah.
And that is the thing. Like, and once again, I hate saying this, especially luckily no one watches this, but but like on a public format, like I hate saying like you don't have to carry that because it almost, but
Well,
or that you should forgive or you could forgive, but to me there is, or even to accuse them of anything, or it sounds like being accused of something, there is a part of you in that scenario. Let's believe something that's patently untrue. If you are sexually assaulted and it makes you feel not good,
dirty,
unclean, dirty, any of these emotions, it's patently false. You did nothing wrong. But there's a part of you, if it's affecting you, if you're carrying it day to day and you hurt, which is very understandable. I don't know that I could be better than a trauma like that in my life, right? But there's a part of you that believes something that's patently false, that you deserve that, or that you need to carry that.
or you brought it on.
You brought it on.
What were you wearing?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Something, if you did nothing wrong, you should be able to put it down, I guess, is what I'm sitting with. And not even saying like that I know that or that that's true. I sure hope so, because I think that people that do nothing wrong deserve to feel okay. And I hope that's true.
When I was really young in therapy, I don't know if I've told this story before, I've had a client, I was supervising another student therapist. And she had a case where it was the third marriage for the woman. And she was really struggling, but she was telling me about it over several weeks of this. And she said, I'm stumped. And what I'd learned was, third marriage, girl had been raped at age 16, lived somewhere around Portland or Seattle, was taken out in the woods by an individual and raped. She somehow survived that. He didn't kill her. I think was a real possibility. First marriage, couldn't bear the thought of intimacy. Second marriage, did every possible kind of thing you could do sexually. And now in the third marriage, she was having, when she went to be intimate with her husband, she would flash back into these things when she was being raped or something. And no matter what, there was a female therapist. She was extremely sensitive, very thoughtful, very considerate, trying everything she knew. And we weren't getting anywhere. And I remember thinking, there's something that hasn't been told. There's something else. No matter what she shared and told about her story, I think there's something else. So that therapist invited me to come, got permission. We both went in, sat with them, and I said, would you just be willing to tell me in terms that would be safe for you to talk about what happened when you were 16, the rape? And she said, yes, I think I could do that. I've talked about it lots of times. And she describes being grabbed in a van, sort of quickly tied up, drive out in the woods. And as she's describing, he parks, and now this is going to begin. She said, I remember thinking, hey, I can find out what sex is like without having to be married.
So and had she ever shared that before?
No. And we all sat there, and it was like, I'm not sure how to read that, but that really seems significant. Because it doesn't feel like doesn't feel like just a rape. It feels like you were going to find out something about it in that.
The fact that she experienced a moment or a thought that wasn't just rejection.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good way to put it. I wish I'd had that language right then. I did have it, didn't use it. But it isn't that I can't believe you're going to do this to me. It was actually welcoming.
At least one moment or one thought or one feeling of like curiosity and then afterwards.
She said, I've never told that part to anybody. And I said, well, yeah, I wouldn't want to admit it either. I get that. And she said, what must I have been like that I would have kind of welcomed that? And the therapist, Patty, was, what 16-year-old girl is not curious about sex?
Yeah.
And she had actually misinterpreted that and had hidden that as, I must be really sick.
Right.
And she hid it.
Right. And that's what I think, like, if you're carrying, I think we should be able to be okay. I believe in a world where we work, we make sense, and we can sort out things and come back. And so if that's true, which maybe it's not, but I like to engage in a world where I believe that.
Well, look, I've seen it happen.
Right, and I have a lot of evidence. Yeah. But if it's true that we can be okay, then when we're not, one possible proposal is that we're believing a lie about ourselves or the world.
Yeah.
She thought because she had this thought that it made her a sick or a really disturbed person.
Yeah.
But putting it into the open allowed it to become something different for her. Hopefully. I mean, was it a turning point for her?
It was. Well, I never went again. And that therapist said that was a turning point.
Yeah.
Because now we weren't talking about the rape anymore. We're talking about how come I would have such a thought? How come I come? And it was like, I mean, her husband went, how could you ever, I mean, what 16-year-old isn't curious about that stuff? And for her, hearing that from him was huge.
And maybe it is a weird thought. I'm thinking of, I want to say it's Frankel's book, but I read too many Holocaust books altogether. I told you this. There's one where they come out of the trains and they're standing in a row, and the SS guard starts to walk around, and he says, some of you are going to be dead within a week. And he looked at Frankel, if I'm remembering who it was correctly, and he says, you'll be dead in 2 days. And Frankel says, I laughed out loud. And he says, I have no earthly idea why I would laugh at that. He says, I can only say that an abnormal response to an abnormal situation is normal.
Yes, I like that.
And maybe I mean, think about this. Here's something I know from like the neurology like classes that I took. I told you this one class we always circle back to, pathophysiology of mental illness, right?
Yeah.
And and it's cool because we kind of just look at what we see, and then we're looking for the result that like is the most helpful. At least that's kind of somewhat what I feel like I'm trying to do. Yeah. Right?
Is this helping?
Right. But this one was interesting because it did have like some rooting in science where they would look at imaging of the brain and stuff like that. And in moments of extreme stress, and I can't think of anything more stressful than being grabbed and forced into a van and knowing what's coming, huge parts of your brain shut off. The cognitive part of your brain shuts off. Fight or flight goes through the roof. At high enough levels of fight or flight, there's fight, flight, and freeze. We never talk about freeze.
Or fawning. That's the fourth one.
What? Tell me fawning.
That one is it's imminent of being overpowered, and fawning is a way to
Right.
I'll become part of what's going on here. You don't have to worry about me. I'm
Almost
not a
like
threat.
the Stockholm kind of thing.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Anyway,
I don't think I have a good definition of that.
I'm
so
just saying,
that's what I've heard.
I don't think I would hold myself accountable for any thought, feeling, or emotion that went through my brain when I knew it was that severely altered and compromised by a massive dose of stress hormones.
See, I'd be careful about saying that because I could see people hearing it and going, okay, so whenever I really behave badly, I can say, well, I was in the fight or flight, and you can't really hold me responsible for that.
Maybe, I don't know. I think that if you are I do think what people do well, taking as much ownership of
What's going on?
of their life and those things.
But that also holds the space for there are some things when it's not all of me here deciding.
I believe
I had
that.
a little part of my brain making decisions.
I've experienced it at lower levels. I've been really anxious, and people come to me and they're like, hey, we have this problem we want you to sort out. And my capacity to sort that problem's diminished. Now, does that mean that I am powerless? No, I can go, man, I am so stressed and so anxious right now that I can't problem solve. I need to get my stress levels down. How do I do that? But it doesn't change the fact that in the moment I am diminished.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it seems really healthy to say what you said, and that didn't feel diminished at all. The acknowledgement of the struggle you're in seemed really healthy.
And I think that's the same thing. To acknowledge that in the middle of being assaulted, and my brain is flooded with hormones and chemicals and stress and cortisol, I might have a weird thought. And
Yes.
maybe I don't have to tie my entire identity to that thought.
Yeah, I get that.
Maybe that thought that happened in that moment, just like in this, from in the box, your thoughts all cling to something altered, right?
Right.
They're thoughts, they're happening.
Yeah.
Well, that's who you are then. Or can you go, oh, that's who I was in that moment.
Yeah.
And in the next moment, I'm not that. In the next moment, I don't cling to suffering. I
Okay.
don't cling to victimhood.
Yeah.
So do we get to recreate ourselves in each moment? And is it okay to say, in a moment of extreme stress, I had a crazy thought? But that doesn't mean I am that crazy thought.
Yeah, that's.
Do we get to continue to interact with it?
I hear that. What I hear echoing in that is that the lawyer Brian Stevenson, who wrote Just Mercy, when he says, "We're better than the worst thing we've ever done.
Yeah.
We're more than the worst thing we've ever done."
Yeah.
Which is so honest, so real in my mind.
Every time you think about an experience, you are recreating. I talk about this with a lot of people that talk trauma with me. Some things about a traumatic experience are concrete. What time was it? Where was I? What was I wearing? Who was there? Specifically what was said. Not what did it mean, but just the words, right? Those are all concrete. Every other thing about that experience is recreated each time that I think through it, right?
Right.
What did it mean that it happened? What did it mean about me? What did it mean about the world? What did it mean about the person that did that to me? That's all created each time.
Every time. Right?
And it has a chance, it's all plastic, it's all malleable, and can become something different over time. What do we, I don't even say what should it become? I say, what do we hope it might become? Right? Just to open like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if it didn't mean that I'm so deranged that I had that thought?
Or that I'm twisted, or I'm
Right. What if it's just
bad.
Under extreme duress, my brain spit out a crazy thought.
Yeah.
And you get to add context to it. I told my husband, and I never would have told him, but I did tell him, And he didn't think it was a big deal. He thought it was a fine thought to have. I told my therapist, and she goes, most teenage girls are curious about sex. And that's what that person thought. But neither of those two people who I trust, neither of them said, you're twisted.
Oh, you were a bad girl.
Yeah, you wanted it.
Yeah.
None of them thought that.
No, but they weren't lawyers and judges. Whoops. Did that come out?
You know what I mean?
Ooh, yes.
I find myself thinking that about dreams a lot too. Like sometimes people have intense dreams, and I think sometimes dreams don't mean anything, and sometimes they might be the most meaningful thing ever. And I tell people to choose which one's most helpful.
Yeah, that's right. So this is years ago. Again, I'm a budding therapist. A woman comes in. I actually remember her name, which is crazy because I never remember names. A few of them are just right there. But she's struggling and trying to be a good, faithful Christian and that, and talks about several things. Well, then finally she says, I have this. She said, my mother tried to kill me when I was young, and crying and crying and crying, and my mom puts a pillow over me, and I actually fight her off. But she said she was going to asphyxiate me, and said, I have this dream about this. I keep having this recurring dream where I can still see the pillow. I can't remember if the pillow is yellow or the room is yellow, whatever. But this is happening, and in my finer moments, I said, have you ever considered having the dream backwards? And she said, well, yeah, just have the dream backwards. Just tell yourself, tonight I'm going to have the dream, but I'm going to have it backwards. She comes back the next week and says, okay, that's weird. She said, here I am. This pillow is over my face, and I can't breathe, and I can't breathe. My mom comes in and takes it off and saves me.
That's so funny.
I went, okay, I don't know what I'm doing here.
I absolutely love it, because I have had times where I'm like, I'm just going to take a shot.
Shows you how desperate we are, because some people's problems and challenges they're wild.
Yeah.
And we therapists have crazy thoughts about them.
Right. We're no different than your client that had the strange thought while being assaulted. Like, I don't have weird thoughts when I go, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we are all over the place tonight. I didn't feel as precise as I wanted to be. There were several times when things just kind of eluded me, and it may be I just wasn't on as well as I wanted to be tonight.
I always enjoy it. I really enjoyed it tonight. It's interesting. My thought as I was going through tonight, I was like, man, there's so many like principles that are really dear to me about being a therapist, or just like things that I value. And we hit like 2 and filled 3 hours with it.
Yeah.
And so maybe I think what I'm going to try and do is write down some of these like these principles that I think govern me, because every day I go, oh, that's a principle, boom. Like I interact with them every day, but maybe I'll write them down. And I don't even know that I want to go through them faster, but to me, there's a lot more to like my belief system around being a good therapist, or really just navigating this world. Yeah. And I think we hit like 2 really good ones that I really like. Wow. And it was a really great conversation, and I really appreciate your.
I always love the stories that come out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, wow. I think if nothing else tonight, if you're second guessing yourself, which I'm not, I really enjoyed it. You're a great storyteller, Chris.
I love telling stories.
You tell great stories. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.